Thank you so much, and really want to thank NAMAH and James and the whole team there that have been putting this conference together for, I guess, the second year in a row. But LaGrasse always appreciates to be part of this and to participate in it. And I've only seen a couple of the speakers, as we're here on the East Coast in the US. We don't really get a chance to tune in normal hours, but it has seemed just an absolutely wonderful conference so far. So thank you very much. Am I audible and everything good? Yep. Okay, I'll assume that. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Okay. And again, I'm assuming that you can see the screen here, just to double check before I start through. Okay, so good. I don't, please open and let me know if you can't hear, if you can't see it. But again, the subject I had selected today was health and healing in the subjective age. Some of you may know that over the past 6 or 7 weeks, kind of closing the year in 2022, we did a series, a new perspective series on the subjective age, which was a very fascinating topic with many different speakers, such as Vladimir and Dr. Basu, Alok, etc. What wasn't touched upon was healing in the subjective age. And so I felt this would be a nice extension into of that particular topic. And so today what I'd like to start with is taking a look at what was meant or considered as health and well-being in previous times. I am a student of Ayurveda, as mentioned, and so I thought, well, let's begin with Ayurveda and let's see its perspective. And I'd like to turn first to the classical Ayurvedic texts, one of which is the Charaka Samhita. And the Charaka Samhita begins with describing a time in which the human race is overcome by extreme disease and has widespread illnesses. And the rishis are gravely concerned of this situation because humanity, being preoccupied by their state of ill health, are no longer following their spiritual paths. And so the great sages at the time approach Brahma for a solution. And he imparts the Vidya of Ayurveda to the Ashwini Kumars. Now, most of you may be familiar with the Ashwini Kumars. They are divine healing twins and offsprings of Surya, the sun, and appear as early as the Rig Veda as healing, divine healing gods. And so they received the Vidya of Ayurveda from Brahma, and in turn, the Ashwini Kumars instructs Indra on the sacred ways of Ayurveda. And Indra passes the knowledge of Ayurveda on to the rishis for the benefit of humanity. So that this passage, which is actually the Sampradaya of Ayurveda, appears in the opening chapter of the Charaka Samhita, informs us that it is the very foundation and purpose of all other chapters that follow. And here what we see is that health and well-being is a prerequisite, was considered and seen as a prerequisite for spiritual progress. That's what's being emphasized in the Sampradaya. And this makes sense because in Ayurveda, the body is actually seen as an instrument or a vehicle for the spirit and a means for accessing more subtle realms of consciousness. So this is interesting, right? Because it contradicts really other prevailing spiritual paths in India at the time, paths that viewed the body as an obstacle, as something to be gotten rid of or transcend or to throw off, rather than a necessary vehicle for self-realization. And many such paths involved actually severe tapasyas of the body, as you know, and life itself was seen as something, again, to transcend. But this isn't the case with Ayurveda. I had the opportunity to listen just briefly to some of Mr. Romanohar's talk yesterday, and he explained that Ayurveda translates as the Veda, or sacred knowledge of Ayur, of life. So it's about the knowledge of embodied life here on earth and really how to optimize overall health and well-being for the purpose of everyday living and spiritual progress. And of course, Sri Aurobindo reminds us that life is the field of a divine manifestation, not yet complete, here in life, on earth, in the body. And we must accept this in our yoga in order to truly or utterly to transmute it. We are forbidden to shrink from the difficulties that this acceptance may add to our struggle. So, and we know that a divine manifestation here in life, on earth, in the body, is the aim of integral yoga, and what Sri Aurobindo refers to as a divine life in a divine body. So if we go back for a second to the Charaka Samhita, Charaka defines a healthy life as one that is sukham and hitam. So sukham ayur, ayur being again life, sukham ayur is a life that is seen as being free of bodily or mental diseases, and one that is endowed with vigor, strength, energy, vitality, activity, and full of both delight and progress. So here we could consider progress to include both on the outer life and as well as the inner life, spiritual progress. And the other definition of a healthy life is hitam ayu, which is the life of a person who expresses goodwill to all beings, is truthful, sincere, and self-controlled, and does what is beneficial to this world and to others. So health and well-being from Ayurveda's perspective is a life, again, that is full of strength, vitality, delight, progress, and goodwill to all. Another critical contribution of Ayurveda is this concept of swasthya. Swasthya means to be situated or established in the self. Now, in embodied life, the self is the soul, the psychic being. So swasthya means being poised in the psychic consciousness. And according again to integral yoga, this state of swasthya, being poised in the psychic consciousness, leads ultimately, right, to a divine life and a divine body, and gives immortality or freedom from death. The body was actually made as a prototype or means for the psychic being to eventually materialize and to become the supramental being. And therefore, the evolving soul requires the body for its growth and eventual materialization. And when this happens, then, of course, the new body will be free from death and will be immortal. And I just had a couple quotes here from the mother on this particular aspect of integral yoga. And here she says, one understands the psychic being materializes itself, and that gives continuity to evolution. And in kind of that same discussion with Vujita, the American secretary for the mother, she also says, and it is precisely the psychic that survives. So if it materializes itself, it means the abolition of death. Right. So ultimately, a divine life and a divine body means immortality, and therefore the health and well-being and strength and vigor of the body is crucial for this psychic, eventual psychic materialization. Now, of course, in that same discussion, the mother also mentioned, certain other peculiarities, if you will, about the supramental being. And she mentioned that it's going to be much taller than the average person now. It'll be unsexed, neither man nor woman. And she also mentioned something very interesting, which was that she noticed, and she was seeing this vision as she was talking to Rujita. And what she noticed is there was this glow that when materialized appears orange. And so she said there's going to be this glow of orange around the supramental being. And then she ends by saying, well, this is the color of Auroville. So the other important notion that we hear and learn from Ayurveda is that during these times when Ayurveda was being codified, and even before, there was this real deep connection that people had with nature. And there was this understanding of the natural rhythms and the cycles of the universe. So Ayurveda understands the importance of this. And on the macro level, as many of you that are familiar with Ayurveda knows, Ayurveda is about establishing resonance with these cosmic rhythms and cycles. One of the early subtexts or subbooks on Ayurveda, the Satamuni Gunam, quotes, "What is there in the external cosmos is existing within this body and vice versa. Both are one and the same." Right? So there was this concept of a hologram, that the individual is a hologram of the universe, and that as individuals, we are holograms of the entire universe, and as well, the universe is a reflection of each of us. So this is, you know, a more recent observation made by others over the last several decades, but this was known clear back in 500 BC and earlier. And this relationship with the universe was seen as very important because it was understood that not only are we the universe, but the universe is conscious of us and waiting for us to awaken, because it is through us that the universe finds its fulfillment in the spiritual awakening. And here we see this relationship of the individual and the universal. Many individuals, each representing the universe uniquely, meeting together, coming together to create and participate as co-creators in the whole birth of new possibilities. So Ayurveda, even though a very ancient system of health, brought very, very important concepts that are relevant today and also reflected in integral yoga. And so with this as kind of a background for health and well-being, what I'd like to do next is just transition to the subjective age. And so look at kind of this idea of during the subjective age, Sri Aurobindo mentions that there'll be new powers and means that can be accessed for the purpose of healing. So looking forward, we can anticipate miraculous recoveries from diseases as these new powers and means that Sri Aurobindo speaks of are discovered, not only for curing illnesses and terminal diseases, but as well for maintaining vibrant health. So to some extent, such powers obviously have already been illustrated, but mainly as something kind of exceptional or occasional. Sri Aurobindo describes these kind of occasional miraculous hearing powers as, quote, "the casual or incomplete manifestation of an acquired capacity rather than the organization of a new consciousness, a new life, and a new nature." But with the coming of the subjective age, we can foresee now the emergence of just such a new consciousness, a new way of life, and a new nature as the early stages of a divine life in a divine body, and miraculous healing powers becoming the norm instead of the occasional. So as we transition into the subjective age, Sri Aurobindo says, the first essential sign must be the growth of the subjective idea of life, the idea of the soul, the inner being, its powers, its possibilities, its growth, its expression, and the creation of a true beautiful, and helpful environment, for it is the one thing of first and last importance. So here we have the key to entry into the subjective age, which is contact with the psychic being. This will be the first crucial sign of the coming of the subjective age. And during this time, there will also be widespread entry into these subliminal realms where there is this deeper knowledge and the discovery of new powers and means are uncovered. This will be part of the initial contact with the psychic being, which is part of the subliminal realm. And Sri Aurobindo describes these realms, these inner subliminal realms, as existing between our outermost nature and the psychic being, and comprised of, he says, an inner mind of intuition and comprehensive memory, an inner life force and its selecting will, an inner physical with a clear, subtle physical sense of things, and behind the inner mind, the inner vital, and the inner physical is the soul or psychic entity supporting them. So this first essential sign of the subjective age means contact with the psychic being, but also contact with the psychic being through these inner realms, if you will, that are both individual and universal. And what I thought I would do here is just, I took a diagram some of you may be familiar with that Matthias Cornelius drew or illustrated in his Drop of Infinity writings. And I tried to simplify it a bit so it's not too overwhelming, but just to define a bit better what we mean by subliminal realms and what we mean by this inner mind, vital, and psychic, and these worlds that are going to open to us as we go through the subjective age, because these inner worlds are what holds these new powers and means that Sri Aurobindo speaks to that will be applicable or will be able to be applied to health and healing. So if we look at this diagram, on the right side, you'll see the ego, and then the ego kind of connected to the outer mind, outer vital, outer physical. And you'll notice that these three are gray in color. And that's really because this outer nature of ours, their distinction between the mind, vital, and the physical are not clearly defined or distinguished. It's very intermixed in our outer nature. But as we move inward, to the inner nature, where the inner mind, inner vital, and inner physical is, now we start to see clear distinctions between these three. And you'll see that along with the outer nature, right? The inner nature, if you look below there, inner nature is also considered part of Prakriti, right? Whereas the inner being or the soul to the clear left is Purusha. So we have our outer and inner mind, vital, and physical all being part of Prakriti. And then we have Purusha, the soul, the innermost. So I was just caught the tail end of what Arudev was taking you through the exercise. But, this is in effect the going inwards, what happens from the outer to dropping deeper within into our inner nature to even deeper within to eventually kind of the soul or the psychic being. Now, the other thing that I was trying to show on this particular example is that when Sri Aurobindo says that subliminal realms will be more accessible to us during the subjective age, what he's speaking about is the inner nature and the inner being. So you can see down there at the very bottom arrow, subliminal being the inner nature and the inner being, whereas the outer nature is the surface. This is not comprehensive at all. I've taken out several things, again, just to simplify it. But, clearly above the inner nature, the inner being, we have the superconscient, and below the inner mind, vital, and physical, we have the subconscient. So So this just gives kind of a quick overview. I will say that this subliminal, I mean, we had several talks on this to New Perspectives. It's a very vast topic. People seem very interested and should be very interested because these are the new realms for exploration during the subjective age. And so I just wanted to mention that for anyone that may be interested in understanding this in more depth, we will be hosting Dr. Basu for a week-long workshop on this topic in February. So we hope you all can join us. He's been a very frequent presenter and speaker for La Grace here. So with that, let's just take a closer look now on this shift, this transition into the subjective age. And here, Sri Aurobindo says, there will be a shift from the individualistic age in which reason and knowing and understanding outwardly through objective means to an age of knowing and understanding through subjective means, self-knowledge, becoming self-conscious and coming face to face with the soul in himself, acting out of his deeper self rather than floundering on the surface. So this is interesting because this comment of coming face to face with the soul and acting out of his deeper self, this is the exact same notion as svastia, as the concept of being connected or positioned in the psychic consciousness. So we see this again, this concept of Ayurveda, svastia, coming back as also this concept of coming face to face with the soul and being crucial in the subjective age. The other thing Sri Aurobindo indicates is that man will be putting himself into conscious harmony with that which lies behind his superficial mentality and psychology. So here, this conscious harmony, we can actually extend this to several levels. There is obviously the outer nature being in conscious harmony with the inner nature, right? So there's no longer this kind of intermixing between the outer mind, vital, and physical, which was indicated by those gray circles in the previous illustrations, right? So when the inner mind, vital, and physical transforms the outer or influences the outer, then they become distinctly different selves or bodies, if you will, or levels of our being. And the second way I can see this conscious harmony being is that when this happens, right, then what we'll have is that each part of our outer nature will be able to live in accordance with its higher purpose, right? The mind, the outer mind will be a vehicle for truth, for wisdom, right, for self-knowledge, and it'll provide access to higher mental levels with true discernment and intuition. And the heart, the heart will be a vehicle for joy and love and harmony. And the vital force, a vehicle for progress, forward movement, and effective power. And of course, the body, a perfect vehicle with the attributes of youth and with strength, adaptability, and eventually luminosity. So this conscious harmony will also align our outer levels with each of their true purposes, or dharmas, if you will. And the other alignment, conscious harmony that we can think of also is that our outer nature, our actions, whether it's relationships or professions or society roles, will also be aligned with the soul's swabhava, right? Swabhava being the soul's chosen path in this embodied life by which it came in to develop and grow experiences in the world. So we see so much discontent in the world, a lot of stress, unhappiness, a general feeling of lack of true purpose. And most of the time, this is because our outer life is not aligned with our soul's swabhava. So the second way of conscious harmony, again, is the expression of our swabhava through our outer actions, through our swadharma, if you will. And then the third thing in terms of conscious harmony will be this larger alignment with nature and the universe. As discussed earlier, this greater alignment with nature and its cosmic rhythms and cycles are a critical component of health and well-being in Ayurveda. So coming face to face with the soul and also being in conscious harmony, our inner with our outer with our inner, and our outer with our soul, if you will, and our whole being aligned with nature and the universe. So let's take a look at a couple of, this is a vast topic again, but I just wanted to take a look at some of the subliminal powers that will be rediscovered during this transition to the subjective period. And there's several here that Sri Aurobindo talks about, and he goes into great length, but let me just touch upon a few. The subliminal memory. Here he says, we remember only a small selection from our perceptions. And of these, even we keep a great part in a storeroom where we can't always lay our hand upon what we need. The inner being retains everything that it has ever received and always has it ready to hand. So Sri Aurobindo here is explaining that this subliminal memory that will be accessible to us is a memory that can hold all things, even things that the outer mind can't understand. He gives an example at one point of a person who hears someone speak Hebrew, a language that the person doesn't know, has never even heard before, right? So no comprehensive of what the words, even the sounds of the words that are being spoken. And yet Sri Aurobindo says that the subliminal memory can hold what was spoken and actually bring it up accurately years later, word for word. He also says that this subliminal memory retains detailed images and exact memories. The inner mind, Sri Aurobindo says, we can form into a coordinated understanding and knowledge only so much of our perceptions and memories as our trained intelligence and mental capacity can grasp in their sense and appreciate in their relations. The intelligence of the inner being needs no training, but preserves the accurate form and relations of all its perceptions and memories, and can grasp immediately when it does not possess already their significance. Right. So when speaking of this inner mind, we can also add that we will have access to knowledge by intuition, by illumined discernment, right? Inspiration, revelation, all these higher levels of the mind will be accessible. And it's not really, the point here is not that we will no longer need the analytical mind, with its functions and its reasoning, but rather than eliminating this analytical mind, that it'll be under the influence of higher levels of the mind. And so the analytical, rational mind will be refined, but not eliminated. And then of the inner vital, Sri Aurobindo says, we perceive only a part of the workings of our life force. The inner vital making dynamic its action through a deeper light and power. So this inner vital is also going to have, because the inner worlds are both individual and universal. So this inner vital will also open us up to universal realms. The inner vital will have kind of unlimited access, if you will, to energy and vitality through the universal pranic field. And then on the inner physical and the physical sense mind, and its perceptions are not confined, as are ordinarily those of the waking mind, to the scanty gleamings of the physical senses, but extend far beyond end use. as telepathy phenomena of many kinds bear witness, a subtle sense, the limits of which are too wide to be easily fixed. So this inner sense mind in the subliminal nature involves a subtle sense of vision, of hearing, of touch, of smell, and taste, right? And they represent kind of they give us access to images and to scenes and to symbolisms that we otherwise wouldn't have. So they're not dependent on the physical senses, right? They create the inner sense, will create this image or scene or sounds that are symbolic rather than actual. And they can also kind of form suggestions for us, thoughts, ideas, intentions. Right. So Sri Aurobindo says it's this inner physical sense mind that will possess the powers of telepathy, of clairvoyance, and similar occult abilities. And all these are abilities that can be used and will be used for health and healing in the subjective age. So one more aspect that I wanted to bring in about the subjective age and these new powers and means that will be available. And that's what Sri Aurobindo calls direct contact. Now, I know this is a fairly long quote, but it's a very important aspect of possibilities during the subjective realm, and this notion of being able to come into direct contact, consciousness with consciousness. So I'm just going to read this fairly slowly and then just discuss it a little bit. So Sri Aurobindo says, but more important is the power of the subliminal to enter into a direct contact of consciousness with other consciousness or with objects, to act without instrumentation by an essential sense inherent in its own substance, by a direct mental vision, by a direct feeling of things, even by a close envelopment and intimate penetration, and a return with the contents of what is enveloped or penetrated, by a direct intimation or impact on the substance of the mind itself, not through outward signs or figures. A revealing intimation or a self-communicating impact of thoughts, feelings, and forces. It is by these means that the inner being achieves an immediate, intimate, and accurate, spontaneous knowledge of persons, of objects, of the occult, and to us intangible energies of the world nature that surround us and impinge upon our own personality, physicality, mind force, and life force. So here Sri Aurobindo is mentioning that there will be this, third level of acquiring knowledge. We have, typically will acquire what he calls objective knowledge or indirect separative contact, which is through our current sense mind and includes things like scientific knowledge of the outer reality. And we've also, acquire knowledge indirectly through kind of semi-objective means. And this is the whole kind of standing back, witnessing, introspection of oneself. But during the subjective age, we will now move to a much deeper type of knowledge. And this will be through direct, intimate contact, right? Consciousness to consciousness. So it'll be possible to actually become directly aware of thoughts and feelings of those around us, to infill their impact, right? To see their movements, to read a mind, right? To read a mind or to fill a heart. And there is a constant mental, vital, subtle physical interchange going on between all who we meet and live together with. But we just, right now, we really don't feel that we're not aware of it. But Sri Aurobindo says that when we grow in consciousness in these subliminal parts, that brings consciousness also of all this interaction and subjective interchange and intermingling, with the result that we'll actually no longer have to be involuntary subjects of their impact and consequence, and that we'll be able to accept or reject or defend ourselves or isolate ourselves from these influences. And at the same time, kind of the other side of the coin through this direct contact, our actions on others need no longer be ignorant or involuntary, and often unintentionally harmful, right? It can be a conscious help, a compassionate accommodation, an approach towards an inner understanding or union. Right, and not as kind of a separate association with limited intimacy, and restricted by much, not by much understanding, if you will, or mutual misrepresentation and error, as Sri Aurobindo says. So this is going to be a major component of the subjective age, entering into a deeper level of knowledge, of experiential knowledge of the inner processes, and also being able to learn consciousness by consciousness, not relying on the outer senses, the outer mind, vital, or even physical. So now all this sounds perhaps very encouraging, but there are also risks that are going to come as this transition occurs. And these risks we can kind of look at as, there'll be many, but the three here that I wanted to really mention is one, a mixed capacity of the inner mental and vital nature with the outer mental and vital nature. Sri Aurobindo says for a greater ignorance and misuse as well as a greater knowledge. So what he's saying here is that we still will have this mixture, especially during the transition between the inner and the outer. And as we access knowledge or wisdom or even cities from this inner world, because there is not purity of the outer nature, this knowledge and these cities and these occult knowledge can be hijacked by our outer nature and not come through as pure truth. So this transition is going to certainly bring this up as a potential danger, and it relates to health and healing as well. Any information from this inner realm can be, if the outer mental, vital, and physical are not pure enough, can be distorted, if you will. And the second danger, a danger of impersonal world forces trying to influence men in their movement towards discovery. So this is actually part of the false subjectivism that Sri Aurobindo mentions. This is acknowledging, there are some universal forces out there, impersonal forces. You can call them auric forces, if you will, that has the ability to influence us. And as we go through this transition, if there is not a clear connection with the psychic that can discern right from wrong and truth from ignorance, then we can be more exposed to these impersonal world forces and misunderstand the forces, if you will. So they may, again, another thing that may try to distort or hijack us during this stage. And then the last one, which I think is very interesting that Sri Aurobindo brings up, is that the more subtle layers of our being tends to progress at a much quicker pace than our gross layers. And this can create disharmony, right? Disharmony as in terms of health and well-being. So this quote from Sri Aurobindo explains a bit more what he means by this. He says, if the whole being could simultaneously advance in its progressive transformation, keeping pace with the inner march of our being and the universe, there would be no illness, there would be no death, but it would have to be literally the whole being integrally from the highest planes, where it is more plastic and yields in the required measure to the transforming forces, down to the most material, which is by nature rigid, stationary, refractory to any rapid remolding. So there will be likely disharmonies between our more subtle beings and our gross outer being. And this harmony will potentially create new diseases, new illnesses, not before made aware. And so even though the subjective age brings much hope in terms of healing potentials, new means of healing, and the ability to kind of reclaim our right to health, there is also going to be risks, and there will be new illnesses and diseases to deal with. So now I wanted to, and I'm assuming we're just going to wait till the end for questions, so I hope this isn't too much. I wanted to move to, what are some of the things that we can do to accelerate this transition? Certainly what I, again, just caught Arudev taking you through these meditations or experiential practices of being able to go within to the psychic, right, to connect with the psychic, and building that bridge from the psychic back out to our outer being is one of the best ways to do it. Another that I wanted to mention is sleep, because Sri Aurobindo says that it's really during our sleep that we have the ability, it kind of opens the gates, if you will, to the subliminal world. And he says, if sleep, if we could use sleep, oftentimes when we go to sleep, we're, unconscious, we have dreams that are coming from the unconscious. We don't really even tap into the subliminal realm. But there is a whole yoga, the mother even speaks of it, the yoga of sleep, in which it can be a sadhana in itself. And it can be the means by which to enter this subliminal world and to receive messages from the subliminal during the sleep, to answer questions or problems, or to a means of spiritual progression by itself, by opening us up to these subliminal worlds. And the more that we're open up to the subliminal worlds in our dream, in our sleep, then the easier it is for us to carry that if we're conscious. So it's the yoga of conscious sleep, carry that into our daily life to the point where we can access these subliminal worlds, even in our waking state. So Sri Aurobindo also says it's not an easy feat. This takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But I particularly wanted to mention this one because we just finished, LaGrasse just finished hosting Jayashree Blench, a woman in our community who has been engaged in this sadhana for many, many years. And she gave just finished a 10-day workshop on this yoga of conscious sleep, which was very well received. And I also understand that she will be doing a 5-day workshop for NAMAH in February. So I would certainly encourage everybody who is interested in this whole notion of sleep as a sadhana and sleep as a means of entering the subliminal and helping, spiritually for us to progress, to tune in to Jayashree. She's absolutely an amazing instructor, and again, someone that has actually used this as a means of her sadhana for the last 10 or 15 years. So now I want to turn to some of the implications to health and healing, and where we are now or have coming from, and where we're going to be in the future. And this will just be first a couple trends that I wanted to share with you all. We've seen in the last decade, and these are stats from the US, an amazing increase in both yoga being asana, yoga asana, and yoga here in the States includes pranayama, as well as meditation. So you can see on the chart on the left, the increase from 2012 to 2021 between yoga, 9.5% to 14.3%, and meditation, 4.1 up to 14.2. So a huge jump in meditation. And I will say, although this says 2021, these numbers were released at the beginning of 2021. So they were actually based on surveys in 2020. And 2 years later, I imagine that these are much larger than what we see here. And then just the other one to the right is just the split between men and women, both in yoga and meditation. We see that, there was a time in which, let's see, yoga, that women were almost predominantly, 85, 90, 95% yoga. And now we see men, and again, this figure will increase if we update it to almost 10%. And in meditation, both men and women that are participating. So at least here in the United States, we have 55, 60 million yoga practitioners and 25 million using some form of meditation. It's also, this meditation has been, the growth has been prompted by mindfulness programs that have become very widespread here. And we also know that, thousands of schools, not just here in the US, but around the world, has children, training children in forms of meditation. Students are being taught, as early as the age of 5 to go within, to find their center of their awareness, to assimilate, right, all their experiences around this core awareness. So this practice is being integrated in the classrooms, it's being integrated in society through yoga, and it's also being integrated, interestingly enough, in the corporate world. If just go to the next slide here. And this is from 2020, in place in 2020. This was a study that Fidelity put out, which is my previous employer for 10 or 15 years when I was living in Boston. They did a study on this emotional mental corporate health programs. And what you can see here is that stress management programs, if we include those considering to implement these in their health programs in companies, considering to include these in their health benefits, it's almost 80%. Mindfulness classes being offered by corporations or planning to offer them, I think that's 79 is not right. 35 and 26, 61 maybe, about 60%. And then happiness programs, which have really been taken over. This is just, to me, a form of mindfulness, but it has kind of earned its own categories, happiness programs, as much as 45%. So we just see this huge upsurge and millions, if not billions of dollars being poured into these emotional and mental health programs by corporations and insurance companies covering many of the wellness programs. So all these are a way of beginning, we can see these as very early stages of the subjective age where people are being trained how to calm their outer being in order to be accessing their inner being. And then the last slide here, just other implications for health and healing in the subjective age. Overall, we've seen here, and I'm sure you've seen also in India, there's just this growing awareness of the soul and of the soul consciousness. As it relates both to the individual, right, to nations, nation souls, and just to the population of the planet. There's just this opening of people becoming aware, whether they call it the inner self, the psychic being, the soul, the inner spirit. It's the same thing. People are being aware of this within themselves, this spirit, this Purusha within themselves. And there's a growing openness to and learning from these inner planes, right? People seem to be encouraging each other, whether it's through their work or their relationships or their play, to live more and more from our inner core, from the soul. So we can expect, obviously, widespread development and application of the occult sciences and their use for self-healing and healing of others. Here I just give some examples: thought transfer, remote healing, etc. But again, Sri Aurobindo says what's being practiced now as miraculous healing is going to become more and more the norm. And then more consistent results with group prayer, energy healing, which is diverse. Biofield healing has become big here in the US. It's essentially aura healing, distant energy healing, or Reiki, chakra healing, crystal healing, etc. And then, as mentioned with sleep, conscious sleep, there will be abilities not only to heal ourselves through conscious sleep, but to heal others. Other two that I put in here is, the sense that many people have of discontent or not really feeling aligned with their purpose. That during the subjective age, as we go deeper and connect with the soul, people will be able to connect and understand their swabhava, what the soul is here to experience in this lifetime, to grow and develop, and they'll be able to therefore align their outer life with it. Healing through the 12 qualities. So we do a lot of work with these 12 qualities here at LaGrosse, and we've been looking at some of the science or some of the research behind it and what others are doing. And research is showing this power of things like gratitude, humility, perseverance, peace. I mean, this is just to mention a few of them, and the impact that it has on the overall health and well-being of the individual and their sense of peace, of satisfaction, of contentment, right? So healing through the 12 qualities. Many of these have become quite widespread in terms of popularity here in the US. A lot of talks and workshops are given around what they call authenticity, which is really sincerity. And the ability, sincerity being what? Being sincere to oneself, understanding our own truth, right? And so the more that we can understand and practice sincerity, the more that we will feel less, that we will feel discontent and despair and lack of alignment, if you will. And then, of course, just, as we mentioned, this expansion of techniques like mindfulness, yoga, nidra, etc. They will continue. So these are some of the new ways or expanded ways of healing that we can expect. I, haven't even kind of mentioned a lot of the changes that are going to happen with the healthcare infrastructure, billions of dollars supporting clinics, hospitals, pharmaceutical industry, health insurance. All this also is obviously going to also change as we kind of reclaim our own right to heal ourselves. And doesn't mean that we won't still need to rely on some specialists in the field, but more and more we'll be able to heal ourselves, and we'll be able to work with others to help in their healing process. So I appreciate you for staying with me. I know it's been a long day for many of you. So I will just stop here and let's see. Okay, so could you please elaborate what is referred to as a subjective age? So that came pretty early on. I'm hoping that's been answered by now. If not, just put in the chat and we can review that. Other questions?
Hi, Radhe. This is Nidhi from Canada, right now in Pondicherry. And lucky to hear you after the 8 series of subjective age. Now I can get the 9th also today. And then my question is, my question is, while we are still connecting with the psychic, you said there are potential risks. So how to stay protected or prevent like any risk from the adverse forces while we are still connecting to the psychic being.
So I'm not sure I understood your question. How to be protected while connected with the
You
psychic?
mentioned about the potential risks while
Oh,
we are,
yes. Mhm.
yeah. So any, like, how to
Yeah.
prevent?
Yeah, it's so Sri Aurobindo says very clearly, and it was actually part of those quotes that I didn't include in there, but that until we go further inward, until we have that connection with the psychic, and until that psychic connection is constant and conscious, we will be exposed to these risks. So it just is what it is. I mean, this is, this will be in any transition from one age to the next. There is always a lot of confusion. There is a lot of illnesses that come up, new illnesses, etc. So it happens. And in the subjective age, other than, I mean, staying connected, having the mother in your heart at all times. Certainly for those that shield themselves with white light, these we can all use, but truly Sri Aurobindo says at the end, it's this connection with the psychic that really the psychic can discern, truth from ignorance, right from wrong, and will quickly prevent any of those risks from occurring. But we just don't have that. I mean, we connect now and then, if we're lucky, and that constant connection isn't there. So the exercise that Ari Dev took you through, certainly doing yoga, conscious sleep will help increase this contact and ability. So I would just recommend, even as Ari Dev says, to bringing down the higher consciousness. All the tools you're probably familiar with, just continue to use and deepen the practice.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, anyone else? Either online participants, any questions, any comments?
And again, I really, really appreciate you all staying here, because I realize it's been a long day, but I hope this has been helpful, and I'll be sending in the PowerPoint to James if that's something you'd like to have access to.
So Radhe, the last thing about, I think Navneet ji was asking about the subjective age. How would you define? So am I understanding it correct that for a layman, not much into understanding Sri Aurobindo or mother, for a layman, can we say that usually our senses are outbound, like we are always looking at objects, like usually our science was always outbound, we are looking at atoms, this and that, and now the thing has shifted to looking within, or looking at the person who is looking. Who is it that is looking at the thing outside? So can you call a transition from objective to subjective age? Like who is the one who is looking at something outer? I don't know, just a means of.
Well, it's so my understanding what Sri Aurobindo explains is that you're actually kind of defining there is the objective knowledge, right? Just as you said, that through the senses and through science, understanding objects, everything outside of ourselves. There is a second poise. That second poise, he actually calls subjective, but it's not the poise in the subjective age, but it's this reflection you're speaking about, the standing back, the witness, observing our thoughts, observing our actions. It's still objective. There's still a split between the subject and object. But in the subjective age, there will be what he calls this direct contact. And this is exactly knowledge from within. This is going completely within. Object and subject disappear. This is no longer.
And
so you can say, yes, turning senses inward.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And what you were sharing about increase in mindfulness practices and techniques, I think that would be like a bridge between completely
Absolutely.
merged into that object oriented thing, then, being dual,
Absolutely.
and then transition to a completely subjective age. Huh?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. These are the signs. These are the signs that we're beginning to transition into the subjective age.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Your slides were very, very helpful. And I'm hoping all of us are looking forward to going through them again. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you
Sorry?
so much.
source, I think you did take all those quotations from Sri Aurobindo's words, if I'm not wrong. People are asking here.
Whatever was italicized, yes, those are Sri
Italicized,
Aurobindo, a couple
yes.
from the mother.
Okay, so italics were from Mother and Sri Aurobindo.
Yes.
I think you will find it on Google, incarnate word, you will find
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and if you want to, I can send out, I can put in my slides, I'll just need a little bit of time. I can put in my slides the source of those, if that would help.
That would be helpful, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Radhe. Thank you for your time
Thank
and
you.
sharing.
Namaste.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So we will meet tomorrow at 9:30 again. Thank you everyone for being here and lots of patience I can see and lots of wanting to learn. So stay happy and happy practice and rest of the day to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Yes.